The hum of the war room's monitors filled the air, a constant reminder of the galaxy's unrelenting chaos. Aria Graves stood at the head of the table, her fingers resting on the holographic map of the galaxy's current war zones. The projection flickered with red markings, humanity's allies in retreat, their strongholds crumbling. On Earth's border, the Alethians' protective shields, once a symbol of their ancient promise, flickered weakly. "Commander Graves, we've lost contact with the Orbital Defense Command," came the voice of Lieutenant Marlowe, breaking the tension in the room. "We're receiving signals, but it's all encrypted. Our communication systems are being jammed." Aria's mind raced. The Alethians, despite their long-standing oath to protect humanity, had grown distant in the past decade. Their once constant presence in the war had vanished, leaving humanity vulnerable. The promise made by the Alethians centuries ago, the sacred vow to shield humanity from galactic threats, was quickly becoming nothing more than a distant memory. Humanity was no longer a protected species, but a target caught in the crossfire of a galactic war they weren't prepared for. "I want every available fleet in the air." Now, Aria commanded, her voice cold, her eyes fixed on the map. "Tell Earth to activate the defensive grid, even if it means sacrificing the northern territories." "But, Commander," Marlowe hesitated, his voice hesitant, "we're running low on resources." "The Alethians are not coming," Aria cut him off sharply. "I've been waiting for months to hear from them, and nothing. You can't keep relying on them. Not anymore." The room went silent. The Alethians had been humanity's protectors, a powerful alien race that had given humanity access to advanced technology and weapons. The oath they had sworn to humanity was clear. As long as humanity remained peaceful, the Alethians would shield them from harm. But humanity's enemies had not honored that same peace. The attacks had been relentless, the most recent one hitting Earth's northern continents with terrifying force. A coordinated strike from the Kaldorians, a species known for their brutal efficiency, had devastated the region. And yet the Alethians hadn't lifted a finger. Aria clenched her jaw, her thoughts a storm. She had seen the Alethians' power firsthand during her younger days. Their majestic ships and glowing shields were symbols of hope. But over the years, their presence had grown more distant, their once sacred promises more hollow. Humanity had been abandoned, left to fend for itself in a galaxy that cared little for their survival. She turned to the large glass window that looked out over the darkened cityscape of New Berlin. Below, the lights flickered in chaotic patterns, a sign of the energy surges caused by the recent attacks. People were still trying to live, to survive, but Aria saw the fear in their eyes. It wasn't just the Kaldorians or the Xrathians or any other hostile race. It was the betrayal of the Alethians that hurt the most. Aria's hands balled into fists. The oath they had taken, humanity's promise to remain neutral, to never seek conquest, had shackled them for too long. It had kept them safe, yes, but at what cost? They were not conquerors, not fighters, but that oath, that promise, had made them weak. Her mind flashed back to the Alethians' final transmission a week ago, coded impersonal. Their words had made it clear, humanity must fend for itself. The oath is no longer valid. The Alethians had abandoned them. Turning back to her officers, Aria spoke with cold clarity. "Prepare the fleet. I'm making contact with the rebels." Marlowe's eyebrows shot up. "Rebels, are you?" "Yes," she interrupted. "It's time to make a decision. We can no longer wait for the Alethians. We need to take matters into our own hands. We will no longer be their puppet. Prepare for a strike." A murmur rippled through the room. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. They had never truly discussed it openly, never considered what breaking the oath would mean. But Aria knew, deep down, that humanity had reached a crossroads. The Alethians were no longer their saviors, and if humanity was to survive, they would need to break the chains of the past. Outside, the city's lights flickered once more, This time, not from fear, but from the spark of something new. The first step in breaking humanity's shackles. Arya walked through the shadowed corridors of the hidden rebel base, the sharp hum of energy pulsing through the walls as her footsteps echoed in the silence. The base was an underground labyrinth, nestled deep within the craggy mountains of Earth's forgotten west. Here, in the hidden heart of resistance, humanity's last hope was being forged in secrecy. Lieutenant Marlowe walked beside her, his face taut with uncertainty. "Commander, you're really going to do this, aren't you?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with concern. Arya's gaze remained straight ahead. "We don't have a choice anymore. If we wait any longer, Earth will fall. I've seen it with my own eyes. The Alethians," she paused, her fist tightening around her datapad, "they've abandoned us." Marlowe hesitated before speaking again. "And what about the oath? You know breaking it will change everything." "I'm aware," Arya said with a cold resolve. "But if we're to survive, we must evolve beyond it. We need the power to fight back, to protect our future, and I think the rebels can give us that." They arrived at a steel door, which hissed open as they approached. Inside the room, a small team of scientists and engineers worked in hushed whispers. At the center of the chamber stood a large cylindrical structure, its surface smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with a strange energy. Arya's eyes narrowed as she approached it, her heart quickening in her chest. "This is the Ether Engine." Dr. Lena Choi, the lead scientist, greeted her, her voice filled with awe. "It was lost in the war long ago. Only the Alethians know its true power, and until now, it was thought to be nothing more than a myth." Arya's mind raced. The Ether Engine, a forgotten weapon created by the Alethians, believed to have been lost after the First Great War. Its potential was unparalleled, capable of turning the tide of any battle. Yet it had remained hidden, locked away in the deepest corners of history. "And you're telling me it's ready to use?" Arya's voice was sharp, demanding. Lena nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. "It is, Commander. But I must warn you, the consequences of activating it are unknown. The Alethians placed safeguards around it, ones we barely understand. If we power it up, there's no telling what it could unleash." Arya glanced at the device, her thoughts a whirlwind. Every instinct screamed to take the risk. Humanity had been waiting too long, depending too much on the Alethians' false promises of peace. They needed this weapon, needed it to survive, to protect their homes, their families, and their future. Her fingers brushed the surface of the Ether Engine, the metallic surface cold and humbling. The decision had already been made, even before she stepped foot in this room. The Alethians had taken the first step by abandoning humanity. Now it was time for humanity to take the next. "We will activate it," Arya said, her voice unwavering. Lena exchanged a glance with her team, then nodded. "Understood, Commander. But you need to be prepared for what follows. If the Alethians discover what we've done, they won't be merciful." A shiver of unease ran down Arya's spine. The Alethians had always seemed invincible. They had stood watch over humanity for so long, providing protection and security. But now they were nothing more than a shadow, a broken promise. The room buzzed as Lena and her team began the activation sequence, their hands flying over the control panels, bringing the Ether Engine to life. The lights dimmed, and the entire base seemed to pulse with energy. A deep, resonant hum filled the air as the Ether Engine powered up, its glow intensifying until it blazed like a star in the center of the room. Arya stood tall, her fists clenched, watching as humanity's last hope flickered to life. It was beautiful, but terrifying. She knew that once the Ether Engine was fully operational, there would be no turning back. There would be no more room for doubt, no more waiting. Humanity had made its choice, and now they would fight for their future. The hum of the Ether Engine echoed throughout the underground facility as Arya stood at the command console, her mind processing the magnitude of their actions. The room was filled with a tense energy, the air thick with anticipation. The weapon was online. They had done it, but what came next was far from clear. Lena stood beside her, her brow furrowed with worry. "It's ready, Commander, but you need to make the call. Once it's deployed, we risk bringing the full wrath of the Alethians down on us." Arya turned to the scientist, her face hard as stone. "Then we'll face it. We've already been abandoned. They left us to die while we waited for a promise that never came. We will survive, Lena, but only if we take the fight to them." Lena swallowed, her gaze dropping to the control panel in front of her. I just don't want to be responsible for what comes next. This weapon, it's unlike anything we've ever seen." "I know," Arya replied quietly. She placed her hand on the console, the surface warm under her fingertips. "And that's why we need it." A sharp alarm suddenly blared, cutting through the tension in the room. Red lights flashed, bathing the walls in an ominous crimson glow. The ground vibrated slightly, as if something massive was moving beneath them. "What the hell?" Marlowe's voice cracked over the comms, his voice laced with disbelief. "Commander, you need to see this. The Alethians." Arya didn't wait for him to finish. She rushed to the nearest monitor, her heart pounding in her chest. The display showed a vast fleet of Alethian ships, their silver, shimmering hulls now visible in orbit above Earth. The fleet was enormous, more ships than Arya had ever seen. But it wasn't just the size of the fleet that made her heart race. It was the unmistakable symbol on their ships. The Alethians were no longer just observing. They were preparing for war. "They're coming," Arya muttered, her breath caught in her throat. Lena's voice was a whisper behind her. "They've found us." Arya's mind raced. They hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated the Alethians acting so quickly. Their fleet was massive, but the Ether engine was humanity's trump card. It could turn the tide of this conflict, but only if they could survive long enough to deploy it. "Get every ship ready for combat," Arya ordered, her voice firm and commanding. "We'll meet them head-on. Lena, initiate the Ether engine's defensive protocols. We need to protect the base at all costs." Lena nodded, though her face was pale with fear. "Understood. But remember, Commander, we're not just facing the Alethians now. We're facing everything they've ever stood for. If we use the Ether engine, there's no telling how they'll react. They may wipe us out without hesitation." "I'm counting on it," Arya replied, her tone unwavering. "But if we don't act now, we'll be wiped out regardless." The sound of rushing footsteps filled the corridor as Marlowe and the rest of the officers arrived at the command center. Arya looked around at her team, seeing the resolve in their eyes. They were all in this together now. There was no turning back. Outside, the sky was dark, the stars barely visible through the swirling mass of Alethian ships now descending upon Earth. Arya felt a sense of finality. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. And if they had to break every vow to get there, so be it. The first salvo of energy bolts from the Alethian ships struck the atmosphere, crackling through the air and lighting up the sky like 1,000 storms. Arya's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. "All hands, prepare for impact," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Humanity fights back. Now." The countdown began. The Ether engine's hum grew louder, the power surging, its energy gathering as Arya's team worked furiously to deploy its weapon systems. The rebel ships were ready, their engines roaring to life as they lifted off from the underground hangars, hurtling into the battle above. The war for humanity's future had begun. The battle above Earth erupted in a blinding flash of light, a cataclysmic storm of energy bolts, missiles, and laser beams. Arya's heart raced as she watched the chaos unfold on the screens before her. The Alethian fleet was overwhelming, their sleek, near-invincible ships firing relentlessly upon the planet below. Yet, humanity's forces were far more numerous than expected, armed with a mix of stolen technology and the newly activated Ether engine, their last and greatest hope. We can't hold them off much longer. Marlowe's voice crackled over the comms, panic evident in his tone. They're breaching our outer defenses. We need to act now. Aria's pulse quickened. She could see the Alethian ships on the scanners, hundreds of them, their polished hulls shimmering in the darkness of space. The Alethians were superior in many ways, more advanced, more experienced, but Aria had one advantage they could not predict: humanity's unwavering will to survive. She turned to Lena, who was frantically working at the Ether engine's control panel, her face drawn with concentration. "Lena, we need the engine now. The Alethians are breaching the outer defense perimeter." Lena nodded, her hands moving in rapid succession across the interface. The lights dimmed as the Ether engine powered up, its hum becoming a deep, resonant vibration throughout the base. Aria watched as the energy levels surged higher and higher. "We're ready," Lena said, her voice steady despite the pressure mounting around them. "Fire everything," Aria ordered. The Ether engine activated with a violent surge of power, sending out a pulse of pure, raw energy. The blast rippled through space, tearing through the fabric of the Alethian fleet like a hot knife through butter. Ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light, their hulls incinerating on impact. It was the first blow the Alethians had ever felt, and it was devastating. Aria's breath caught as she watched their enemies scramble in the aftermath, their fleet reeling from the unexpected attack. But there were too many of them, and the Alethians quickly regrouped, adapting faster than Aria had anticipated. The vast majority of their fleet remained intact. Direct hit on their flagship. Marlowe's voice rang out, both astonished and urgent. "But they're still coming. They've adapted their shields. The Ether engine's pulse won't do much more than slow them down now." The realization hit Aria like a punch to the gut. The Ether engine had given them a momentary advantage, but it wasn't enough to secure victory. Not yet, not by a long shot. "We need a new plan," Aria muttered under her breath, her mind racing. The Ether engine could only deliver so much firepower. If they were to have any hope of winning, they needed to think bigger. "Commander," Lena spoke up, her voice breaking the tension, "there's a way to amplify the engine's power, but we'll need to divert everything from the shields. It's a one-time shot. If we do this, there's no turning back." Aria met Lena's gaze, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. The scientist's eyes were determined, but there was an underlying fear she couldn't mask. "Do it," Aria said firmly. "We can't afford to lose. Not now." Lena nodded, her fingers flying over the control panel as she diverted the Ether engine's full power toward its offensive capabilities. Aria felt a surge of adrenaline as the power levels climbed higher and higher, until the entire facility seemed to pulse with energy. Every light, every hum, every vibration was amplified as the weapon gathered its strength. "Ready, Commander," Lena said, a thin sheen of sweat on her brow. Aria took one last breath, her resolve solidifying. Fire. The Ether engine unleashed its full might. A massive wave of energy tore through space, its sheer force rending the void between Earth and the Alethian fleet. The shockwave stretched outward, decimating everything in its path. The Alethian ships, large and powerful as they were, couldn't withstand the onslaught. Entire sections of their fleet disintegrated in a cascade of explosions, their shields failing under the immense pressure. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though humanity had achieved the impossible. But then, through the smoke and debris, something shifted. One Alethian ship, larger than the others, emerged from the devastation. Its hull was battered, but it remained operational. This ship was different. It wasn't just another warship. It was their flagship. "We've only angered them," Aria whispered. "The Alethians would never forgive this." The war was far from over. Aria's breath caught in her throat as the Alethian flagship, scared but intact, pushed through the wreckage of its fallen comrades. The monstrous vessel was massive, its sleek, dark hull shimmering like a predator in the night. Despite the destruction their fleet had suffered, the Alethians had clearly unleashed their fury. The flagship was a symbol of their undying resolve, and Arya knew it meant nothing less than the end for humanity if they didn't find a way to stop it. "They're not retreating," Marlowe's voice crackled over the comms. His voice held a note of dread. "The flagship is charging its weapons. If it gets within range, we'll be done." Arya's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The Aether engine's pulse had delivered a catastrophic blow to the Alethian fleet, but the flagship was still standing, and its weapons were more advanced than anything they'd ever encountered. She needed more time, more firepower, anything to hold them off. "Lena, can we power up the engine again?" she demanded. "We need to stop that ship now." Lena's voice was tense as she responded. "We can recharge, but it'll take time. The engine's power is already nearly maxed out. If we keep pushing it, we risk a catastrophic overload. The damage could be worse than just losing the fight." "We don't have time to be careful," Arya snapped, the weight of the situation crushing her chest. "We have to do it, or humanity's finished." Lena hesitated, the fear evident in her voice. "If you're sure, Commander." "I'm sure. Do it." The room fell silent as Lena worked quickly to reroute every last bit of energy into the Aether engine's offensive capabilities. The air was thick with tension, each second dragging on like an eternity. Arya could feel the burn of exhaustion in her bones, but there was no room for weakness. Not now. Humanity's last stand was here, and it was up to them to survive. Outside, the Alethian flagship loomed larger, its weapons preparing for a devastating blast. Arya's mind flashed through the history of her people, the betrayals, the lost promises, the broken oaths. Humanity had always fought back against impossible odds, and now it was their time again. "Commander," Lena's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're ready." Arya turned to face the control panel. The hum of the Aether engine had become deafening, its power reverberating through the walls of the facility. She could feel the energy coursing through the room, a tangible force pressing against her skin. "Fire," she commanded. A torrent of energy erupted from the Aether engine, brighter and more intense than anything they had unleashed before. The blast streaked toward the Alethian flagship with the fury of a dying star, ripping through the void at impossible speed. The flagship's shields flared, struggling to hold the blast at bay, but the sheer intensity of the Aether engine's power was too much. For a moment, the entire universe seemed to hold its breath as the beam made contact. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the fabric of space. The flagship's shield shattered, and the ship itself trembled under the force. But it wasn't enough. The Alethians had anticipated something like this, and their flagship had been reinforced beyond their calculations. The blast had dealt a crippling blow, but the ship was still operational, now more dangerous than ever. Arya's fists clenched at her sides, a feeling of helpless rage building within her. "We're not finished yet," she growled. "Prepare for the next round. We're going to end this, once and for all." But then, something unexpected happened. The Alethian flagship didn't fire. Instead, its massive hangar doors opened, revealing a host of smaller ships, fighters, bombers, and warships, emerging in a coordinated assault. The Alethians had made their final move, their forces unleashed in full force. "Damn it!" Marlowe shouted as the smaller ships spread out, their weapons primed and aimed directly at humanity's fleet. "They're swarming us. We're outnumbered." Arya gritted her teeth, her mind racing. The Aether engine was their only hope, but it wasn't enough to face the full might of the Alethian war machine. Humanity had only one option left. "We have to take the fight to them," Arya said, her voice resolute. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault. We'll cripple their command ship, no matter what it takes." As the Alethian forces closed in, Arya gave the order. The fight had reached its final stage. There was no retreat, no surrender. It was all or nothing. Humanity would either win or perish in the stars. The tension in the command center was palpable as Aria stood before the panoramic viewport, her eyes fixed on the Alethian fleet. The enemy was closing in, but her resolve was ironclad. The Alethians had struck first, but humanity had fought back with all they had, and now they had only one path forward: destruction or victory. "We've reloaded the Aether engine," Lena reported, her voice tight with urgency. "But we're running on fumes. If we fire again, we'll be at critical levels." Aria nodded, understanding the sacrifice. "It doesn't matter. We fight until we can't anymore. Prepare the fleet for full engagement." The crew moved quickly to comply. The hum of the Aether engine reverberated through the ship, filling the command center with an almost deafening vibration. Outside, humanity's warships were forming up into a loose battle formation, ready to engage in a final desperate push. Marlowe's voice crackled in her ear. "Commander, the Alethians are initiating a full-on assault. They're targeting our weaker ships first, trying to destabilize our lines. If we don't take down their flagship now, we'll be picked apart piece by piece." Aria gritted her teeth. "That's what they want. A chance to break us apart. We won't give them the satisfaction." Lena turned from her console, eyes wide with determination. "I've enhanced the engine's targeting system. If we can sync the shot with our fleet's assault, we might be able to breach their flagship's core." Aria's mind raced. This was it. One shot, one chance. She glanced at the viewports once more, seeing the Alethian ships, towering, cold, and unyielding. But this time, something had changed in her. She no longer feared the sheer might of their forces. It was as if she could already see the future unfolding, humanity's victory written in the stars. "We can do this," she whispered to herself, then spoke aloud. "Fleet, engage. All ships, fire at will. Bring everything you have to bear on their flagship." The command rang out, and for a moment, the vast expanse of space seemed to tremble as humanity's fleet unleashed its fury. Lasers and missiles streaked across the void, impacting the Alethian ships with deadly precision. The Alethian forces retaliated almost instantly, their weapons unleashing a torrent of energy that rocked the fleet. But it wasn't enough, not this time. The Aether engine's core surged to life, its power amplified to its absolute limit. The brilliant beam of energy fired from the massive cannon, streaking toward the Alethian flagship with blinding intensity. It sliced through the vacuum of space, cutting through smaller enemy ships in its wake like paper. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was unlike anything Aria had ever seen. The flagship trembled, its shields flickering before they disintegrated under the overwhelming force of the Aether engine's blast. The core of the ship, the heart of Alethian power, exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The shockwave sent smaller ships flying, and the massive flagship began to disintegrate, pieces of its once pristine hull floating into space like fragments of a broken star. But the battle wasn't over yet. Despite the destruction of their flagship, the Alethians fought with a ferocity that defied logic. Their remaining forces rallied around the shattered remains of their command ship, their unity strengthened by the loss. They were not an empire built on surrender. They were built on relentless determination. Aria watched as the remaining Alethian ships reformed, their advanced weaponry already charging for another wave of destruction. The gap between victory and defeat was closing fast, and humanity's fleet, though battered and exhausted, was still standing. Barely. "Commander," Marlowe called urgently. "Their reinforcements are incoming. More ships than we can handle. We won't survive another wave." Aria clenched her fists, fighting to maintain control over her racing thoughts. The Aether engine had done its job, but it wasn't enough to stop the Alethians entirely. The only option left was to cripple their forces for good, and that meant taking the fight directly to the heart of their remaining fleet. "Pull back all ships," Aria commanded. We'll regroup and focus everything on their central command cluster. No distractions, no mercy. Lena looked at Arya, her expression filled with anxiety. Commander, we don't have much left. The engine is at its breaking point. If we take another hit, it could explode, taking the entire fleet with it. Arya met Lena's gaze, her expression unwavering. We don't have a choice. This is our last chance. As the fleet began to pull back into a tighter formation, Arya's mind turned back to the oath, the promise humanity had broken. To save itself, it had chosen survival over peace. To win, it had unleashed its most powerful weapon. And now, with the future of Earth and its people hanging in the balance, there was no turning back. This final assault would determine whether humanity would continue or vanish into the cold void of space. The final blow was coming. Humanity's fleet reformed, its battered ships falling into a tight defensive circle. The Alethians, despite the catastrophic loss of their flagship, weren't retreating. Their relentless drive had become a force of nature, and now they were determined to finish what they had started. The Aether engine, its power waning, pulsed faintly in the heart of the flagship, its energy reserves nearly exhausted. But Arya's resolve was unwavering. They had fought too hard, bled too much, and sacrificed too much to let this final assault fall short. Commander, Marlowe's voice broke through the tension. Their reinforcements are almost here. We don't have much time. If we can't break their central command cluster now, we won't survive the next wave. Arya looked at the viewports once more. The Alethian fleet had reformed, and their ships were advancing with terrifying precision. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running on empty, but humanity had one final weapon: unity. It was the strength that had carried them through centuries of war, famine, and strife. It was their greatest asset, the unshakable belief that when they fought together, nothing could break them. We're not done yet, Arya said, her voice fierce with determination. We'll give them everything we've got. Lena, still at her station, worked furiously to reroute power from the failing systems to the Aether engine. Commander, if we do this, we'll be running on empty. One more shot, and we'll have no power left. I know, Arya replied, her voice steady, but we have no choice. She turned to the communications panel. All ships, prepare for final engagement. We'll focus everything we have on their central command cluster. I want no distractions. We either end this now or we die trying. For Earth, for humanity. The fleet responded with a chorus of acknowledgments. Despite the dire circumstances, their spirit remained unbroken. They knew the stakes. They knew what was at risk. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a fight for everything humanity had built, for the future of the human race. The Alethian ships closed in, their weapons primed, but humanity's fleet was faster, more nimble. Every maneuver was a testament to their training, their resilience, and their unyielding will to win. They danced through the void, dodging incoming fire and returning their own with deadly precision. But the Alethians weren't slowing down. Their ships fired relentlessly, their lasers tearing through the darkness, targeting every weak spot in the human fleet. Every hit felt like a punch to the gut, sending shockwaves through Arya's ship, rattling her bones. But they didn't stop. The humans pressed forward, determined to finish what they had started. The Aether engine hummed louder, its energy levels fluctuating wildly as Lena pushed it to its limits. Arya could feel the tension building, the weight of every decision pressing down on her. One shot, one final desperate move. The Alethian command cluster was in range. Prepare the Aether engine, Arya ordered, her voice low but commanding. This is it. All power to the main cannon. We're going to end this. The hum of the engine grew deafening, the sheer amount of energy being channeled shaking the ship's framework. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, the only sound that seemed to exist in the void of space. Her crew moved with precision, synchronized in their determination. Outside, the Alethian ships were closing in, their weapons charged and ready to strike. It was a race against time. They had no more tricks left, no more reserves. It was all or nothing. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Lena counted down, her hands a blur as she worked the controls. The beam shot forth, a brilliant column of light that stretched out across the void. The Alethian command cluster had no time to react. The beam slammed into the heart of the fleet, its intensity beyond anything the Alethians had prepared for. Shields flared and flickered, but they couldn't withstand the force. The core of the cluster shattered, sending a chain reaction through the Alethian ships. The explosion was immense. The stars themselves seemed to bend in the aftermath, the shockwave rippling through the fabric of space. Smaller ships disintegrated on impact, and the remaining Alethian forces reeled, thrown into disarray. For a brief moment, the battlefield was quiet. The devastation was total. But then, a voice came through the comms, barely audible, filled with static. "Commander Area, this is Captain Lan of the Perseverance. We've done it. The Alethians, they've been crippled." Aria's heart skipped a beat. It was over. The Alethians had been defeated. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a wave of relief washed over her. "Confirming, Commander," Marlowe's voice echoed. "The Alethians are in retreat. The core of their fleet is shattered." But Aria wasn't celebrating. Not yet. The cost had been too high. Her hands tightened on the console as she surveyed the damage, the burning remnants of the Alethian fleet, and the wreckage of humanity's own ships. They had won, but at what cost? "The battle is over," she said, her voice steady, but hollow. "But the war, it's far from done." As the remnants of the Alethian fleet scattered, Aria knew the real struggle was only just beginning. Humanity had broken its oath to survive. But now they would have to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had seen the cost of their defiance. The last stand had been won, but the future was uncertain. The aftermath of the battle stretched across the vast emptiness of space like a scar. Humanity had emerged victorious, but the cost of that victory was evident in the damaged ships drifting through the void, the remains of fallen comrades, and the fragile silence that had settled over the battlefield. For a moment, it felt as though the entire galaxy held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to begin. Aria stood at the helm of the flagship, staring out at the remains of the Alethian fleet. They had been shattered, their advance crushed, but the price had been steep. Humanity's forces had taken heavy losses, and many ships were crippled beyond repair. The Ether engine had fired its final shot, and with it, the promise of survival had been fulfilled. But now they were left with nothing but the wreckage of a war-torn galaxy. "Commander, the fleet is holding position." Marlowe's voice came through the comm, his tone low. "The Alethians are retreating, but the rest of the galaxy is still watching. We need to prepare for the next phase. What's our next move?" Aria sighed, feeling the weight of the question settle over her. She had no clear answer. For so long, survival had been the only goal. But now that humanity had triumphed, they were faced with the difficult task of rebuilding, not just their fleet, but their place in the universe. They had broken their oath, forsaking peace to ensure their survival. Now they would have to answer for it. "We'll need to negotiate," Aria said, her voice heavy with thought. "We've made our stand. Now we have to ensure we're not hunted down for what we've done." Lena, who had been monitoring the comms, spoke up. "There are factions on both sides of the conflict that will want to make an example of us. The Alethians may be retreating, but others will see this as an opportunity to rise against us." "I know," Aria replied, "but we've earned our place in the galaxy. We've proven ourselves. We will need to show strength, but also seek alliances. We can't afford to stand alone anymore." The fleet began to move, limping toward their next destination. The stars ahead were filled with uncertainty, and the unknown stretched out before them like an endless horizon. But for the first time in a long while, Aria felt a spark of hope. They had survived. They had fought and won, and now they could begin to chart their own future. As the ships regrouped, a message came through the comms, this one from an unexpected source. "This is High Admiral Syndra of the Zithari fleet," the voice said, calm but firm. "We have been watching your actions, Commander. Your victory over the Alethians has not gone unnoticed. We seek an audience with you. Humanity's strength has earned the respect of many." Aria's heart skipped. The Zithari were known to be a reclusive and fiercely independent species. Their arrival now, in the wake of the battle, was not just a sign of respect, it was a lifeline. The Zithari were formidable warriors, and their alliance could change the course of the galaxy. "I accept," Aria replied without hesitation. "We have much to discuss." The comms flickered as the Zithari fleet appeared on their sensors. Their ships, sleek and deadly, cut through the darkness like shadows. A fleet that could either become humanity's greatest ally or their next adversary. As the two fleets prepared to meet, Aria stood tall in the command center. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The galaxy was vast, and the consequences of humanity's broken oath would echo far and wide. But now, with the first steps toward peace and stability on the horizon, Aria had no doubts humanity would endure. "We fought for survival," she murmured, "and now we will fight for a future." The final battle was over. The Alethians had been broken. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength, its resilience, and its determination to protect what was theirs. But the true test had only just begun. The time had come to rebuild, to reclaim their place in the galaxy, and to face the difficult questions that arose from breaking their oath. The next era would be defined not by war, but by the choices they made now, in the aftermath of victory. And in that moment, standing on the precipice of the future, Aria knew one thing above all else: humanity had earned its place in the stars.